Ty Pope was born in the South Bronx.
In that time of the 80s, you had a lot going on. You had the AIDS epidemic, and then you had the arrival of crack cocaine. You can tell that the Bronx was gonna emerge.
Born to a family of community organizers, Ty got a scholarship to NYU. So it might surprise you that he spent 20 years in public service with the New York Police Department.
I happened to be one of the very few officers that happened to be undercover in both the Narcotics Bureau and Internal Affairs. A lot of the stuff that I did do and was involved in, a lot of it made the news.
Ty Pope embodies a contradiction so many of us can relate to. We want to change the system, but to do that, sometimes you have to work within it.
You can be considered too black for the uniform and too blue for your people. And there was always that division there, and there was always that pull there.
This is his narrative.
What was New York like the first 10, 12 years of my life? It was very much, what's depicted in the movies. It was very different. It was very dark, very gritty. I saw a lot of things growing up as a young child, of the South Bronx. I was here during the blackouts in the 70s. I actually remember, when the lights went out that day, and I remember, the destruction and things going on in our neighborhoods and how our neighborhoods really lost out during that blackout. Now, this is a time, post-Vietnam War. You had vets coming back home that weren't accepted. Times were hard. There were a lot of labor cuts during that time. We didn't grow up in a bustling, booming economy. But my grandparents and my family, definitely raised by a village, definitely made it happen, with what we had at that time. And my grandmother was basically like the matron of the neighborhood. Like, she really helped bring the neighborhood together. I get emotional when I talk about her, because if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here right now. Now, what led me up to taking this job, all right, and joining the NYPD and not going further and continuing with the college, I had an incident at Manhattan College, and this was my crossroads. All right, we were invited to an event in Manhattan College by their student union and our student union. All right. So we came up from the village, from NYU, to fellowship and party and whatnot and hang out with our friends that went to Manhattan College. But it was the after occurrence that really put a bad, feeling and a bad taste in my mouth. All right. So after the function was over at Manhattan College, we were being escorted or being walked, back to the front gate towards 241st Street, Van Cortlandt Park, because that's where the train stop was at, and that's where Manhattan College leads to, okay? Manhattan College is a Jesuit school. They have priests there and so on and so forth and whatnot like that, all right? We were all welcome there. We were their guests and whatnot. But as we are being ushered out, you can say, or being escorted or walked out and whatnot, who do we encounter at the front gate of Manhattan College? But a tall, white police lieutenant in his white shirt with a group of rookie cops in a bullhorn, who kindly told us to get out of his neighborhood. And it wasn't pleasant. Now, he didn't know us from Adam. He didn't know what these 8 men or what these 8 kids would have become. He just made the assumption that we were there, And the people from Manhattan College, the priest and whoever, the brothers, whoever they were, or whatever like that, just looked on while this man with his bullhorn belittled us and basically followed us, walking outside his squad car with his group of, I think now I can say I know what they were because I ended up actually joining the police department afterwards. His rookie cops, his FTOs, his NSU or whatever they used to call them back then, and start following us and walking us towards the train station. But apparently we were moving too fast, There were a couple of expletives, blurted out over, the bullhorn that as he ushered us along. And then at that time, there was a song out by the Ghetto Boys called My Mind's Playing Tricks on Me. Remember that song? One of my guys was singing that song, and it said, this year Halloween fell on the weekend. Me and boys would trick or treat. And he was just singing the song out loud. And this man, this lieutenant, this commander, unbeknownst to him, did not understand, our culture, what we was about and whatnot. And he took offense to that, and he thought we were talking outside the box or whatever like that. And he hems, one of my friends up, locks him up, and ruffles us up and dares us to do anything. So they ended up, it was 8 of us, they ended up taking 2 of us, all right? And he made the threat, if you follow us back to the station house, which was located on 231st Street, right off of Broadway, the 50 precinct, one of the precincts back in the day, and many of them in the Bronx that I feared driving through as a cop. Damn. All right? There's certain areas that I feared driving through, and that sucks, and I was a police officer. It didn't matter. All right? But he didn't know what kind of kids we were, and he didn't know what kind of men we would become, and he didn't know who he was dealing with. So, you talk to the wrong group of young men because we just came off of fighting for an Africana Studies program at our school, and you think we're going to sit back and let you take our guys and not show up to your precinct? So guess what we did? We walked and we showed up and we stood outside the precinct and waited for our 2 guys to come out. So the young rookie cop comes out and says, well, Spanish guy, and it's like, yo, didn't I tell you guys, okay, this guy's going to lose it? We're like, so what? So we stood across the street and we waited across the corner and we stood right in front of the door, waited for our guys to come out. This lieutenant comes out, it takes 2 more of us and brings them back aside. But we still stayed and we stood our ground and waited till our guys got released. Now it was just 4 of us waiting outside. We waited in front of the 50th precinct for our guys to be released, and then gave our guys, like, I think it wasn't even DATs, I think it was summonses, and spewed them on our way. But all that could have been avoided, if he would have just treated us, with care and treated us like as if we were human. But you got to understand, during that day and time, and during that era, communication is key. And what we lack in our communities is we lack communication. We don't know how to talk to each other and and resolve our problems or get things out. And that's what hurts us. And what will continue to hurt us as a nation is if we don't learn how to speak and how to listen and how to comprehend and how to understand and how to have those hard talks. Those talks that no one wants to talk about. Until we start getting gut checked and really speaking about what's right, and you want to talk about morality and moral leadership, you want to talk about empathetic leadership, then you know what? There's an old African proverb that says if you want to invoke change, it starts at the dinner table. And it starts with those little conversations. All right? And do you have a friend that you can invite over that's not your color or not of your essence or might not believe in what you believe in, but are you willing to have them sit and talk? It's not going to be until then, until we have those real hardcore talks, until we really face each other as a nation or face each other or whatever, then we ever going to invoke any type of change. Just the basic communication, the basic in between the lines, okay? And that's what that police lieutenant lacked and did not understand. So he set that in motion. I went back to NYU and I told my supervisor about what happened that day. And I also told him about the offer that I was given. And you know what he said to me? He said this. He said, okay, you talk about them and you tell me that incident, you talk about them so bad and this is what happened, this is what happened. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to help change it? How are you going to provoke change or bring about some sort of change? He said, you talk so much about it, and the only way to do something that's worthwhile, to do something that's positive, that's progressive, is for you to try to do it within. You talk so bad about it, won't you do something about it? That's the problem. And that's when I said to myself, you know what? Maybe I'll take the job. And he said, you know what? You take the job, take that job and see if you can make a change within. And if you don't like the job, you're always welcome to come back here. So I took the job. And while my friends were graduating from NYU and graduating in the park and throwing their hats up in the air and jumping in the fountain, I was walking across the stage in Madison Square Garden with a gold band around my arm, meaning that I was one of the top students in the police academy. And I had joined at that time, which was the housing police, because I chose to go into the housing police instead of going straight into the NYPD.
So how many police departments or police types existed at that time?
There were
three. Transit, housing.
Yes, there were three at that time.
How many are there now?
There's only one.
There's only one now?
Yeah, they all merged into each other in 1995.
Oh, wow. I thought you were going to say there was more. Now there's a drug one.
No. They all merged. They all merged in 1995 during the Giuliani administration.
Interesting.
That's how he sold I'm going to expand your police department. Yeah, he expanded it. He merged us all. All right. And it was a good thing and it was a bad thing. But it did some work. And from there, I just started moving up within the department.
Well, how long were you in housing before all of this merging happened?
Before the merge, I was in housing for 3 years before the merge.
And then the merge happened. And then
the merge happened. And as soon as the merge happened, that's when I found my start.
Okay.
And I found that through an old housing lieutenant that I used to drive. I was a sergeant's driver.
And what did housing mean? What did you do as part of housing?
Part of housing? I chose the housing police because it was the New York City Housing Authority. They controlled the projects, the housing developments of New York City. They were a police department that specialized in just the housing developments throughout all 5 boroughs. All right, it's extensive. All right, and so it was very interesting. It's federally funded police department. That catered to the residents of NYCHA. Right throughout here. And right over here, you have one of the largest housing developments right here in Queensbridge, which is a few blocks away. Mott Haven in the Bronx, Claremont Village in the Bronx, the Polo Grounds, St. Nicholas houses, Amsterdam houses, Manhattanville, Grant houses, Wagner houses, Pink houses, Brevoort houses, Reese houses, Baruch houses. There's not a place, Drogsnet, there's not a place I have not worked, in New York City, throughout my career in law enforcement. All right. So my career started in the New York City Housing Police, and it quickly rose and developed right after that. While I was in the New York City Housing Police, they had certain initiatives going on at that time, and that was the beginning of broken windows policing and a lot of little experimental things to shape and mold and combat crime at that time. I chose the housing police because I grew up in the housing development. I grew up around the housing projects. I know, it like the back of my hand. These are my people. This is where I'm from. That's where I want to be. And that's where I thought I could really have an impact. So I started off in the housing police, and I started off in Central Harlem, right in 142nd Street, right in Drew Hamilton houses, where a housing police station was built right into the development. So we pulled out of there. That's where the station was. And I covered Central Harlem for the beginning of my career. And while I was there, I drove the lieutenants, and I drove the supervisors, I drove the sergeants, but I was a sergeant's driver at that time. And I came upon a young sergeant who saw something in me that I did not see. And he said, you know what? This is right before the merge, and right when we were going into the merge, he was like, you're not going to make your star here. He said, where you're going to shine is in narcotics. And in 95, right after we merged, no longer than a month after we merged, that's when I got picked up by the narcotics division in the NYPD.
And was this narcotics division big at the time? Was it getting bigger because of, you had to mention it was crack, and because it was post-Nixon era, and this is...
Yeah, it was big at the time.
It was big. So
the Organized Crime Control Bureau.
So was it the biggest of all of the units?
Yes.
So they were trying to recruit everyone for this, I'm sure, right?
They weren't trying to recruit.
Not everyone? Okay, you were special.
Nah. It was at that time, I was recruited as an undercover.
Okay.
Recruit candidate. At that time, there really was no application. There was just a picture, a photo, boom, and you got called in. You got sent to an auditorium at an undisclosed location. They show you a video of how operations go, and they ask you, are you in or not? At that time, I think it was about 15 of us who were chosen to go to this location and sit there and look at this and look and observe and see if this was for us. I think out of that 15, 10 took the job.
Okay.
And from there, it started snowballing. From there, we started moving.
So what does undercover life look like as a rookie, or like early on?
As a young cop, African-American male, it was quite interesting. Very interested. Very interested.
What are some memorable stories?
Very memorable. You got to understand, my father had 3 sons, and, of his 3 sons, my father would always say that, being the youngest of the 3 sons, you have a little bit of everything, a little bit of book smarts, a little bit of street smarts, a little bit of savvy, and that's what it takes to really become an undercover, in the New York City Police Department. So from there, the star just started to rise. I became a detective early on in my career. At the age of 23, I was already a detective. I wasn't in narcotics that long. At that time, you had to have at least 9 months in an investigative track to achieve the gold shield. But they changed the rules After a while, it made it 18 months or 2 years in that capacity. But the reason it was such a fast track is because a lot of undercovers put their lives on the line, doing that type of job. You're severed from the department in a certain way because you're out there buying drugs and guns, and you're putting your life on the line. No vest, no shield.
And do you you're given some leads and then you just go and try to buy and make friends and...
No, I mean, there's points where you can self-generate a case, but for most part, a lot of information comes in through intelligence reports and through 911 calls. And, every 911 call that's made, paper gets generated on it. And from there, those complaints get issued out to the different bureaus where they're associated with. And if there are narcotic complaints, then those complaints in those locations and those 911 calls and, for drug sales here and there, you get your information via that way and whatnot. And they have complaint reports that are filled out, what they call kites on locations. And, you get direction through that.
So you've bought a lot of illegal drugs in your life?
Yes, I have. And do I look like it? Now?
You do not look like you're a gangster.
You're probably one of the best to ever do it.
One of the best to ever do it. You have to tell us a story or two then. Like what?
Yeah, one of the best to ever do it.
A couple of the ones that are in your mind at least.
A couple of those ones. And then you got to understand towards the end of my career, I became a supervisor, after I got promoted, to the rank of sergeant. I became a supervisor, and not that long after I was promoted to supervisor, I was called back to the bureau as a supervisor to run a narcotics unit. And then eventually I got promoted again to the rank of supervising detective squad, SDS, which is a specialty rank, which is sort of along the rank of a lieutenant. And I became the commander of my own unit in Northern Manhattan.
And all of this happened before what age?
All this happened in my
or this was all the whole journey?
All through my journey, all through my 20s and my 30s. You figure out, I joined the police department when I was 20 years old. I retired when I was 42.
Wow.
So the majority of my life has been on the straight and narrow.
Yeah.
All of my life. I really didn't have, you can say, a really like flashy life, because of the things I did and the roles I took on. But I began to live my life, upon my retirement.
After retirement?
Yeah, and really.
How heavy were those 20 years or so?
Those 20 years were very heavy. You're looking at the years of broken windows policing, quality of life enforcement, and mass incarceration. And I hate to say I played a part in it. Especially being early on in my career, being involved in one of the first quality of life enforcement teams that was out there before I went to narcotics. As a community policing team, a sweep team that was out there issuing books of summonses, that would see summonses that were being issued, for quality of life offenses that would later on generate numbers and cause rifts within our communities, when it came to, stop and frisk and, and other types of aggressive enforcement and so on and so forth.
Did you feel like it was wrong at the time?
Did I feel like it was wrong? I feel like I was doing God's work, but I'm also part of the community that's smart, that really can see through a lot of it. And a lot of it was BS. But my thing is this, in the enforcement, the quality of life enforcement did somewhat clean up a lot of neighborhoods.
What does that mean?
And quality of life. Quality of life, basic loitering, trespass, vagrancy, unlawful possession of marijuana.
For loitering, you could arrest someone?
Yeah, you can issue a summons.
Wow.
For open beer container, for urinating in public, for the squeegee men, at the corner, cleaning for blocking the vestibules of the banks and so on and so forth.
These are things that very rarely people are summoned for now.
Very rarely people are summoned for, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that broken windows policing model. The thing about it, they went after the small things in order to get at the big things because they were having big problems. And a lot of it was to generate confidential informants and things like that, to break down a lot of these organizations and so on and so forth. And it did clean up the communities in such a way, but the aggressive manner it went about it, was kind of unempathetic. But the plan worked successfully. But what do you do when you are too successful and you're overly successful and you go beyond the measure? What happens when the bosses and the pirates push you to go further and go more? All right? There was no succession plan. I don't think there was really any succession plan. Like, what will we do when we have all this cleaned up? What route are we going to go?
Once everyone's in prison?
Once everything is done, where are we going to go? Are you going to keep kicking the dog when it's down? Eventually, that dog is going to survive. Eventually, that dog is going to bite back. And that's what has happened, in our communities and across the nation. You can see it.
What do you mean bite back? And when do you think that happens?
They're going to fight back. The human, our survival of the fittest, our human instinct. You can only keep a man down but so long. Eventually, that man's going to speak back.
But do you mean like the relationship between people and government and people and authority?
Between people and government, between people and the community, between the police and the community.
And was there a point in time when you could say there was still high trust in law enforcement? Do you feel like when you were a police officer there was high trust in law enforcement? And it changed at some point, or?
I can say that. Yeah, you can say that. There was high trust in law enforcement, but there's always been trust in law enforcement, and there's always been trust in the police department. But when you violate that trust, and then when people see these images, and when police departments violate their rules themselves, that's when it becomes a problem. All right? Now, I happen to be one of the very rare few officers that happen to be undercover in both the Narcotics Bureau and Internal Affairs as well. So my integrity is beyond high.
What does that mean in Internal Affairs?
Like Internal Affairs,
yeah.
I locked up police officers.
Wow.
I investigated corruption.
And you were undercover for that?
Yes.
So they had no idea that you were investigating
I was undercover in 2 bureaus.
At the same time?
Not at the same time. One right before I got promoted to supervisor. A lot of times what the police department used to do is, in order to fill the ranks in Internal Affairs, because no one really wanted to go, they would send people who were on promotional exam lists to fill those ranks and do investigations, and basically to learn integrity and to learn the internal investigations and how they're properly done. Now, I went to Internal Affairs and I was part of a group called Group 55. We basically were a surveillance unit. We really didn't put hands on a lot of people, but what we did do, we investigated a lot of high-profile crimes that happened to involve, crooked cops, and not just crooked cops, but political figures as well. All right. So a lot of the stuff that I did do and was involved in, a lot of it can't be mentioned, but a lot of it made the news.
Okay.
So And from there, I got promoted to sergeant, and that's when I went back to narcotics.
Is there a story you can mention? Something that maybe broke the news?
Nah, maybe a little bit down the line.
A little down the line.
Down the line. But, I was involved in a lot of heavy cases, when I was in narcotics, as an undercover, in narcotics, and as a supervisor in narcotics as well. Because my unit that I was in charge of in Manhattan, northern Manhattan, which was probably the drug hub of the whole eastern seaboard of the United States, we get involved in a lot of heavy things that went on in upper Manhattan. I was very visible.
Could you give us some details without being specific of anyone that would
I had a couple of cases, involving major weight and heavy figures, home invasions, and the Washington Heights and Inwood area of Manhattan. Played an influential part in a neighborhood block cleanup on Post Avenue, which was known as a heavy drug trafficking area, in northern Manhattan, to the point where, I was given a nickname 50 by a lot of the residents that lived up in that area and whatnot. Post was a very peculiar street because it was divided amongst three different zones. You had upper, middle, and lower Post, more towards Dyckman to 207. All right. From Dyckman to Academy, you could probably get any amount of weed you want or pills. From Academy to 204, you can get bags of coke or whatever like that. From 204 to 207, you can get weight, kilos, things like that. Whatever.
And you would know this, and would you come and do big arrests, or would you'd use these people as informants to get to?
We did a major sweep up there that was recognized and took down about 35 to 75 people in one swoop.
And was it generally the people that were being arrested? Were there ever any wealthy users that you were finding or arresting, or were you mostly focused on?
Sometimes, doing basic enforcement like buy and bust enforcement, in the area up there, because it was right next to the bridge, right off of the GW, which is a major thoroughway, and you can go 6 ways to anywhere right from that area right there. We'll get a lot of people coming in from out of state. One time we caught a kid from West Virginia with about 20,000 ecstasy pills and canisters of Barbasol shaving cream, homed out canisters of Barbasol shaving cream, and you would never know that this kid was like the ecstasy king of West Virginia.
Wow.
Opie looking like kid, redhead with glasses, looked like a nerd, but he was driving around upper Manhattan, in a with West Virginia plates with a young African-American male that if you see them two together, they had no business being together. You know what I'm saying? Little tips off like that you go, bump into and whatnot, going into houses and, unveiling traps that will fall out from the ceiling and things like that. You come across a lot of, instances, where you encounter, these things and whatnot. And a lot of great work by detectives that worked for me and, that were under my direction, under my leadership, and did a lot to combat, the narcotics that was being trafficked in those areas up there.
When you look back, what is the work that you're most proud of from that time frame?
The work that I'm most proud of from that time frame is the work that I did towards the end of my career in northern Manhattan as a supervisor. What was that? That I personally took hand in, doing, and looking back and looking at a lot of instances that have happened across the nation and whatnot, and looking at a lot of units and the way they conduct themselves and do things, you really have to be diligent and do your due diligence when you're in charge and in control of organizations. Of units, like the ones that that I work with. No mistakes can be done. What happened in places like Tennessee and Kentucky and Breonna Taylor and things like that. Under my watch, that would never happen. That would have never happened.
Why do you think that stuff happens?
Why? Because then you have investigators that don't do their part and properly investigate. I had an advantage being a former undercover, and now being a supervisor of a unit that does that type of enforcement. I know exactly what to look for, know exactly where to go, know exactly what to do, and everything is hands-on, all right? My surveillances and my recognizances were personally done by myself. No other supervisor in the Northern Manhattan could probably get in where I got it.
You mean basically being able to investigate other police officers and being able to detect?
Oh, that was when I was in internal affairs.
For clarity,
I'm talking about doing the narcotics investigations.
But you were saying with Breonna Taylor and these types of things, they wouldn't happen under your watch.
Why? Because as a supervisor, I was hands-on. I personally went out and did the recon myself. So if I'm going to hit a door, I'm going to know that's the door to be hit. Why? Because I marked it. And a lot of supervisors that weren't like me couldn't move in the areas that I moved it. You couldn't pull up, and your CBR 954 parking in front of the building, flip your biker helmet back, if your biker jacket, walk into a location, go mark a door, come back down and know that's the spot that you hit. And then the next morning, go back and hit that spot because you got personal eyes on that spot. Those are the type of things and advantages that I had over a lot of supervisors that I work with.
What made you this way versus then?
Being where I come from, being part of the community, and still having family that's connected to the streets. Well, what better way to, be acclimated, be up to date. Your little cousins, your friends, you still, we still talk, we still mingle, what's the trend, what's going on, and, being able to move around. And then, I still lived in the hood. I still lived in the South Bronx.
Yeah.
So.
What are your views on law enforcement now being out of it and
being out of it? I think, not for nothing, like I said before, for a lot of years, growing up, I made that sacrifice in 1984 to go away from my education. And in a lot of ways, I felt that during the time that I was, spent my career in the police department, I felt like I failed myself. And I felt like I failed, my people. Not my people meaning my people in whole, but my grandparents and whatnot. But in a way I didn't, because I went away to accomplish a goal, to get a degree and to come back and to make a difference. But what I learned in my older years is that I went about it a different way. Two roads emerged, I took the one that was less followed by. That Robert Frost poem, and even though it might seem like it was the hard way, it was the right way, because it was the way that led me to where I'm at right now. And that's why I consider myself a criminal sociologist, a criminologist, a sociologist. My way of giving back, through education, through actually experiencing, what, you read in textbooks. I actually lived it. So I lecture from both not only theory and textbook, but I also lecture from actual live and lived experiences, and that's what brings everything twofold. So I think everything that I went through led up to this, where I should be in academia, all right, and teach it. So
with all of the actual practice and the theory now in your head, like when you look at the criminal justice system, what do you think are like the top issues that are most pressing in your mind right now?
Some of the top issues that are most pressing in criminal justice: accountability. All right, being held accountable for the actions. Accessibility. All right, communication. Okay. There's so many different aspects, to policing that can be touched on. A lot of things are warranted and a lot of things are unwarranted. All right. Like I said, the number one issue that I see is communication and the way we use language. Okay. And how language is used and how language is communicated. All right. What we have to come to is we have to come to a point where the police departments and the people in the police departments, what they have to come to understand is that they are public servants. You take the job to serve the public. That is your goal. That is your mission. The best advice that I've was ever given by anyone wasn't from a police officer, and I'll say it again, was from my grandmother. And the one thing she told me was this, right before she passed away, August 24th, 1994. I remember that day like it's the day. Tell you, it's my best friend. Treat people the way you will want them to treat me, meaning her. Treat people the way you will want them to treat me. Treat them with respect, all right? Treat everyone the same, all right? And give them back the energy that they give you, But treat them the way you will want to treat me. And I took that with me, throughout my career, and I still keep that with me to today. And one of the most crucial points within the NYPD mission that I always take to heart is the point when it comes to the values and they talk about integrity. Because so much is expected of us because we expect so much from others. So we have to hold our integrity high, okay? And that's where I take my cue from. That's where I get guided by, and I keep that to today within me. Treat others like you will want to treat.
In the police department, did you find that there were a lot of people who were high integrity like yourself, or that the majority that you encountered were not?
Yes.
The majority you encountered you felt were high integrity people?
A lot. You got some that, high integrity, but then you do have bad apples.
Yeah.
And then our time, it's everything's out there, it's sometimes the bad apples outweigh, or distort what the message, really is, because you got a lot of hardworking men and women, a lot of hardworking people that, that operate within the police department,
But how do you prevent low integrity people from getting into positions of power like that? Because that's one of the challenges, right? Is like,
it's going to be a challenge, especially when you have, when you're in an organization that's, that's a civil organization, that's open to the public, that basically you have to take, a test to move up and within. So anyone can come in, and any type of person can come in and be influenced, but it's their upbringing.
Right.
That's why I always call for, to give those who want to become part of the NYPD. I think there should be some sort of residency requirement, and people who actually are from the community to be given a chance, to work here. I don't think that a college degree is really needed, to do law enforcement type of work or do criminal justice type of work, but a college degree does enhance it. I think once you took that venue, that route away from those who really want to do the job, those working class people, those blue collar people that really wanted to do this job and really want to make a difference, once you took that option away for them to get a leg away, to get a segue in to this type of work, I think you took away a lot of that connection, because you do have some people that are out there that want to do this job that might not have a chance to do this job because they don't have the accessibility, to attain it.
Yeah. So you mentioned in high school being an athlete. I'm curious, throughout your life, what are the habits, the rituals, a sense of spirituality that keeps you mentally strong and the type of person that you want to be every day?
The discipline, being disciplined, being able to set a goal and to stick to it. Yeah. The discipline, being able to set a goal to stick to it.
But what do you do to maintain your disciplines? Is there anything? Do you read? Do you write? Do you work out?
I work out
a dread?
Well, being disciplined. If you would have saw me about a year ago or so, I've probably been about 100 pounds heavier. Last year I took on a fitness journey after one of my very good friends who happened to be a doctor himself, passed away from a stroke. And I said to myself, if my friend, and my brother, could, and he was a medical doctor, if he could, and we were the same age, and if that could happen to him, what could happen to me? So I took it upon myself to, dedicate myself to a life of fitness, and it's been working out, and I'm at where I'm at now. So I went from 290 to 217.
It's pretty impressive.
And you ask me why I wear this summer sweater when I come in, and it's 80 something degrees outside, but I feel comfortable. I feel good.
Yeah.
And I feel good in my skin. And I stick to the to the program. And one thing you'll learn about me, and especially over the course of life, I'm very much, if I get locked into something, and I'm locked in. So and I don't let a couple of days go by without working out or doing something dedicated to fitness and to movements. Because I say in my 50s, I'm aging myself now. Now in my 50s, I don't want to be. I want to be more mobile. I want to be light. I don't want to be bulky. I want to be nice, lean, and be able to move around and function. So my workouts are functional workouts. A lot of core, a lot of kettlebells, a lot of stairs, and I got back into biking, a lot of biking.
Okay.
So I do a little bit of everything. All right. I'm kind of obsessed with it. My spirituality, of course, yeah, spirituality. I go to Grace Baptist Church.
Okay.
In Mount Vernon. That's the church I'm claiming. I'm giving myself a mic. You got me. Yeah, and also mental health.
Yeah.
During my doctoral journey, it was a lot of ups and downs, a lot of highs and lows.
This was after?
This is after I retired and went on the rest of my life. Because after I retired in 2012, that's when I said I'm going to go back and complete everything I did not complete as a younger man and complete that mission. So my first year after I retired, I went to culinary school for a year. So I got a culinary degree, a degree of culinary management from the Institute of Culinary Education.
Wow.
Right down on, we were on 23rd Street. Now they're down at Soho. Now the school's down at Soho. So thank you, Brian. Thank you, Alan. Shout out to you. You guys helped me make that happen. And then I happened to fall upon a continuing ed program at a school called Concordia College. And once I went to an open house, right after I finished my degree, my culinary degree, I immediately rolled in right after the open house. And I ended up finishing my bachelor's degree. But at this time, the school did not have the metropolitan studies, background that I had at NYU. I left NYU with 103 college credits. I should have graduated, but instead I became a cop. So what I did was they took all those credits, they rolled them over, and I ended up getting a degree in business. So I got a business degree, a BS in business. So I got a business degree, business administration. During that time, I said, you know what? Now it's 2016. So I retired in 12, 13, I got my culinary degree. 16, I finished up with my bachelor's. During that time, in between, while I was about to finish up, the school had a master's program in business. And I was debating whether I should take a crack at law school because I had the criminal justice background, or should I go with my master's? I ended up getting into the master's program, which was like an 18-month program attached to that to that BA. So I ended up rolling over into the master's program and received my master's the next year in 17. So now I got a business, a BS in business, and an MBA.
Wow.
At that time, I was considering law school, so I was taking the LSACs and was going studying for law school. But at that time, when I was in the master's program, I was a grad assistant, with one of the business professors, helping out students with finance and economics. And I did such a good job with that the professor who was there was like, listen, I don't think law school is your route. That's not your lane, because I applied to a lot of law schools. I got turned down by 10 and I got into one. And that school was in California. The other schools, I got turned, it was like towards the end, I was just cutting the cuff and I was discouraged. I was like, what am I going to do? This man, Philip Rothman, he said, you know what? That's not your lane. Education is your lane. I just completed a PhD program. I think you'll be a great candidate for it. You should consider this program. So he sponsored me, to join this program. And it was more rigorous than trying to get into law school. You got to go through all types of boards. You got to do all types of live writing samples, sit before this one, sit before that one. So I ended up getting into the PhD program. And I rolled over into the PhD program. And over the course of the years, right after that, after I received my master's, the next year I joined the program, and it was a fast track accelerated program. So you can get your PhD in 36 months opposed to in 3 years, doing all your coursework, your field work, your dissertation and everything all at the same time within that 3-year period, opposed to getting your PhD in a traditional sense, which usually takes about 5 to 7 years, So I did the advanced program. It's Rarely do they accept a lot of students into that cohort because it's so complex and it's very demanding and you have to keep a certain level. But in the midst of the program, COVID hits. So we get delayed.
Yeah.
But I ended up finishing, and within 10 years, within a decade, within 9 years after I retired from the NYPD, degreeless, quote unquote, a college dropout, I had a culinary degree, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a doctorate before I hit my 10-year mark as being retired for 10 years.
Wow.
So within that first 9 years, I completed all that.
I realize I forgot to ask, why did you decide to retire when you did?
Because in the NYPD, after 20 years of service, you have that option of retirement. Because of the way the job is situated, how hectic the job is, you have that option to retire. And your pension is basically secured and locked in at that 20-year mark.
Okay.
So every year after 20 years is just extra added on. So why play Russian roulette with your pension after those 20 years when you're already locked in? Anything can happen. So you know what? In 2012, my father passed away that January. By July of 2012, you know what? My heart wasn't in the work no more. I was feeling a certain kind of way. And after spending a weekend at a 4th of July detail and hear people and all those explosives going off and all those fireworks and whatnot, I said I might have to call it a day. So I went in the next day, that Monday after the detail that year, and I went down to the pension section and I had them run my numbers, and they said, this is what you'll look like if you retire, because you already completed you're in your 21st year. If you want to leave, this is what it'll look like. And I said to myself, you know what? Maybe I take a chance on myself. And I stepped out, and I say it's never too late. It's never too late. I don't feel young. I don't feel old. I think the police department kept me young.
Yeah.
Especially during those, you say during those years, those 20s or 30s, because I wasn't out on the street doing things that regular person would do at my age. I was basically out here living, a straight life, actually upholding the law.
Yeah.
So, things had evolved.
If you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice along this way, what would it have been?
If I could go back and give myself one piece of advice from whichever.
Let's say before you joined the police,
Before
NYPD
department. If I can go back and give myself a piece of advice, I would say, don't be too hard on myself. And as I was saying before, during my doctoral journey, I sought what a lot of, Black men don't really do, and a lot of people in the African American community don't really do, is mental health counseling. And I think me reaching out to someone, just to, talk things over and talk things out that wouldn't be judgmental, that, that wouldn't take a stance, that would just be there just to listen and hear me out. Because you got to understand, from a young age, at the age of 20, and being given so much responsibility, that one, that you can take someone's freedom, two, you can take someone's life, three, and you can have your own life taken, and I've seen so much, and I've done so much, and I've seen so much bad, but I've also saw so much good. and I kept a lot of people's secrets, but what do I do with mine? You know, who do I talk to about mine? And it came a point where I had to say to myself, I had to talk to someone. I had to seek this out. And I think that was the most adult thing I've ever done in my life. And it took a lot for me to seek that, you know, and to look for that help, and to actually sit down, open, and talk with someone. And over the years, my personal relationships, you know, whether it be with a significant other or a baby's mama or whatever like that, what lacked was that openness and that line of communication. And I think me reaching out on that mental health tip, you know, me reaching out for someone, and someone that would be non-judgmental, and not look for someone specific. I wanted an older female, preferably African American, you know, with a similar background, you know, that was possibly, you know, in higher ed or whatever, you know, that lived a life. And I found that, you know, and she's been the best thing that ever happened to me ever in my life.
Yeah.
You know, and she's helped me open up in ways that I've never opened up before, to even find, you know, my person and me, and to find that other person that I'm looking for. And that's been the best thing.
It seems like, I think she maybe helped with this, but was there a point where you feel like you were ever jaded about humanity?
Yes. I have a photo. I have a large, like, mosaic, you know, in my apartment, that one of my detectives who was into woodwork made for me, you know, after I retired. And I call that piece the dichotomy of man, because it's a canvas with the blue, black, and white stripes of the American flag, but it's in the police colors, that Blue Lives Matter, like, type flag colors, but it's blended and merged in to the other side of the canvas, which is the African American flag, that red, black, and green. You know, red for the blood, black for the skin, green for the land, you know. And they're merged and blended into each other. And then on the top, there's the NYPD patch symbol in one corner. And on the bottom of the display are all the shields that I possessed, you know, that are held throughout my career. And then he has my designation as a SDS, you know, at the bottom of it now, and my name written on the bottom. But that canvas explains a lot, because even though, you know, you can be considered too black for the uniform and too blue for your people. Mm-hmm. And there was always that division there. There was always that pull there when I joined that police department. But what kept me different than others is that I always had that voice in back of my head from my grandmother, and I never forgot where I came from, or where I was born, or where I was going, or what I experienced. And I think the experiences throughout my life, the early part of my life, from a young child to the age of 13, had a role to play in that. And then from 13 to 18, when I lived, in Hudson, Ohio, that had a role to play in it. So I lived in two different worlds, okay, and came from two different places, and both of those places have built and made me. All right, I lived in a world of affluence, and I lived in a world without, and they both came together when I came to college, and when I joined the police department, you know what? Both those worlds collided again, but they were both separate. The police department had its own world and my community had its own world. I would go home to my community and by some I would be ridiculed. I would go into the police department and by some I wouldn't be accepted. All right? And then within the police department, they had their own subcultures, and divisions within, just like within my community. So dealing with them both have been a mission, in my life. But I've learned how to navigate both, all right? And none of them are different than the other. In the end, we're all human.
And you're optimistic about humanity?
Yes, I am.
Pretty good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.